Do you ever find yourself spending way too long on an email or spending a half an hour trying to figure out what to wear for the day? Well, that's called overcomplicating things, right? And we all do it. So in this video, I'm going to teach you a few helpful tips as to how to stop overcomplicating life. But before we get into the tips, let's talk about why we overcomplicate things in the first place. So first, let's talk about the complexity bias. That's where us as human beings think that if something is more complex, more complicated, then it must be safer. Whereas if something is more simple, we think that it's suspicious. So naturally, we choose the more complicated route because that feels safer to us. There have even been multiple studies done where when people are given two options to solve a problem, one being the more complex option and one being the simpler option, most people will choose the more complicated option because it feels safer to them. It feels more credible to them. Our brains love complexity because it feels like we're doing something meaningful. But here's the twist. Complexity gives us the illusion of progress, when in reality, it's actually slowing us down. So we confuse doing a lot with getting somewhere, and they're actually two very different things. But want to know what the real cause of overcomplicating things is? Fear. Fear of being judged. Fear of not making the right decision. Fear of being criticized. Fear of being wrong. Fear of not being enough. Fear of losing control. This is survival wiring. Your brain thinks that if it's not complicated, then it must not be safe. Simple feels risky. Complicated feels like protection, even when that's what actually keeps you stuck. Basically, it's like if it's too simple, then it must be too good to be true. And that's just not accurate. And then there's perfectionism, right? I'll start when everything's lined up. I'll start when everything looks perfect. I'll start when I have prepared for 3,000 hours. Really, it's all BS, and you do not need to feed into it. Then there's information overload, where you go to Google for a simple question, and you end up down some rabbit hole. You end up like on YouTube, on Instagram, blogs, figuring out what the answer is, and you've gotten so much information that it stops you in your tracks, and you don't even know where to begin. And when there's too much information, the brain freezes instead of making a decision. And then, of course, there's lack of clarity, decision fatigue. And that's when you have to make so many decisions every day, just as a living, surviving human being, such as what to eat, what to wear, what to watch on television, yada, yada, yada. What happens after making all these decisions is your brain gets really tired. And because its default mode is overcomplicating things, it's going to jump to doing that. And then because of the fact that even though we don't need to do it anymore to survive, our brains are still overcomplicating everything. It has become a habit. And it just keeps happening over and over and over again because there's been nothing to stop it. So you're subconsciously overcomplicating things and probably not even realizing that you're doing it. Where I overcomplicate things often is writing emails. It could take me 25 minutes to write an email that might be like 4 lines long. I just write it and then rewrite it and then rewrite it. And to me, it's just not perfect enough. And it's ridiculous. I do not need to be doing that. Like probably the first draft is fine. Maybe the second draft. Sincerely, Catherine, and move on. So when I think back, that has probably taken up a lot of time in my life that I could have been using doing something else. And another quick example I want to share with you guys is thinking about coaching clients that I've worked with in the past. Whether it's somebody moving into a new home and they've brought with them a ton of boxes full of their stuff and all they have to do is empty them out and put everything where it needs to go. But what they tend to do is overcomplicate it and it becomes this big daunting process and they freeze up and don't do anything. Or you have the person who has been living in the same home for years and years and years and they've just collected a lot of things. And all that they need to do is organize things. What goes to the Goodwill? What do I still use? And what do I use every so often but just needs to be stored in particular boxes? But again, the overcomplicating of that just seems so complicated freezes people. And so they don't end up following through with doing that until they get some help from a life coach. So now let's get into these tips that will help you to chill the F out and stop complicating your life. Focus on one step at a time. You don't need to worry about the rest of the day or the rest of the project. You just need to worry about that first step. Give that your undivided attention, and that will instantly relieve the overwhelm. Tip 2, Choose the simplest option first. If just a couple of steps does the job, great. Why add an extra 8 steps onto it for no reason? This kind of reminds me of the veterinarian that I go to for my cat, and I've also brought my last 3 dogs to that vet also, but I've stuck with him for so long because that's always been his approach. If I bring my pets into him with, say, a medical issue, he's going to say to me, let's try the most holistic, simplest option first. And that'll probably work. And if it doesn't work, then we'll go to plan B. So I advise you guys to do the same thing in any area of life. Tip number 3, set micro deadlines for small decisions. So give yourself 60 seconds to make a small decision and 5 minutes to make a medium decision. When you shrink the time, you shrink the anxiety. A constraint creates clarity. And finally, ask yourself, what is the easiest step I can take at this moment in time? That is the best way to release the anxiety, release the overwhelm, and that one question can simplify your entire life. So now we know that overcomplicating things is just our brain's way of keeping us safe and keeping us alive. But we also know that it's outdated and we don't need to behave like that anymore. So the next time you come up to a situation where you are going to overcomplicate things, you are empowered with the knowledge to step right over it and take the easiest solution first. So if this resonated with you, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. I always love to hear what you guys have to say. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Rocky. Rocky. Okay, so what's your take on overcomplicating things? Do you overcomplicate things as a cat? Well, you don't. Okay, so what's your wisdom on that? What advice can you give us as humans to stop overcomplicating everything, Rocky? That we're just crazy? Yeah, all right. Yeah, I think you're right. All right, cut.